Good morning and afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Tea with Rich. I am T, and I am here with my forever friend and co-host, Rich Lyons. How you doing today, Rich? We won't say what day it is because that would just spoil everything.
No
But how
one
you
will
doing, buddy?
know. Yeah. I am well. How are you, my friend? It's always good to
I
see you.
No complaints. I've only golfed once this week because of schedule conflicts, and all my boys are here. So we literally just spent 4 hours together. We went out to breakfast and a bunch of other stuff. So this week has been all about quality time with the kids, and we have another guest, and I couldn't be more excited to have you on, Frank. We've talked about having you on forever. I think we've had to cancel a couple of times. I really appreciate you making the time to come on here, Frank DeMaria.
Yeah,
You're a legend on the brand side. So how you doing, bud?
thanks, TJ. I'm doing really good. Very excited to be here. Honored, humbled, and quite honestly, a little terrified of where this conversation may go.
It's all
Don't be.
easy.
We're
All easy crap.
humble. We're intimidated by you. You got to remember, you're the brand side guy. You have to write the checks. We have to
Right?
ask for the checks. So it's a little different. It is funny when we get people on here what everyone's perception is, but dude, you're a legend on the brand side. I mean, you've been at it. Gosh. 25 years now, right? I mean, roughly in e-com or web development, because you sort of predate e-com, kind of like Rich and I do. But no, I think that's awesome. Um, we're gonna get into having you do an intro, Frank, so you can think about that
Yeah.
for a minute. Like I said, you
All
can
right.
go or as deep or as shallow as you want. But why don't we just do some updates here, Rich? Have you been traveling? Like, what's been going on with you since the last time we talked?
I had the girls in town. I think we talked about that, but they were in town all week for. I saw them for Father's Day, which was great, and we went to a wedding, so that was fun. And then I took a quick trip down to Winston-Salem, played some golf with some good friends. So, and Coach Aaron, shout out to Coach Aaron. He just got the head coaching job at East Tennessee State University, so he's becoming a head coach for the first time in Johnson City. Never been there, but I will go there now.
Head coach of what?
For men's golf, sorry.
All right. Yeah, that's all right. That's
So
soon.
he's a real golfer, TJ. Like when I play with those guys, like those guys are crazy golfers. I got to play with Aaron and Coach Jerry Haas, and we played golf yesterday, and those guys are knocking down flags. I mean, I saw Coach Haas at least three tap-in birdies, and I'm just scrambling to try to get on the green.
I was actually in a charity scramble for Mayhew. We haven't talked about Mayhew yet. That's kind of a personal story for me, but I brought my youngest son, Jack, to a charity scramble with a couple of buddies, and my role on the team was literally putting. I probably sunk 8 to 10 footers, which I was pretty psyched about. Which, by the way, anyone listening,
That's
very
awesome.
unusual. That's not my game. My game is 2 or 3 putt a 10-footer, but my handicap's a 23-2 now, so that's okay. I'm hoping that I don't want it to go down too fast, because then I actually have to play well all the time, and I'm just learning that guys learn your handicap and they want to steal money from you when they're really good. It's an interesting thing that I didn't know about. So, Frank,
It's called
do you golf?
sandbagging.
I don't.
You don't. How was your Father's
I
Day? That
do
was a
not.
couple weeks ago, but we never know when people are going to listen to this.
Yeah, it was good. It was pretty lucky. We were actually out of town. We were supposed to be at a baseball tournament for my son, but it ended up getting rained out. So it was sort of just a relaxing day around. Did a little kayaking. So it was nice.
Now, do you have young kids or older kids, or like mine are 18 and 20 and 20? Rich's are 24 and 70.
Yeah, mine are a little bit younger. My daughter is 17, so she'll be a senior coming up here and doing all the college stuff. And my son's going into high school next year. He's 14.
Oh wow. Oh wow. So you still got some time left.
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. Awesome. I have done nothing. I've been hanging out. I almost wrote a sabbatical post on LinkedIn. Day whatever. I got to figure out what day it is. But the boy's mom is off on like a book club trip in Napa or California somewhere. So I've had the boys for 10 days. It's been awesome. I've been getting my ass
Great.
kicked in cribbage pretty regularly. I lost a poker game. We decided to play poker with chips yesterday. That didn't go well for me either. The only thing I got going for me is I can beat Jack in golf, and so that's really about it. And I've been doing a lot of
I'm
cooking.
sure you can outcook all of them. I'm sure you can outcook all of them. Come on.
Yeah, but they're they're consumers. I'm a producer when it comes to food. They're consumers. So, honestly, just settling in and trying to stay healthy. Try and keep my face routine going. Rich and I talked in the last episode, which will go up probably before this one, about the word. Remember the word I couldn't remember about the breastplate? I was calling it like coquetty or chocolatey or whatever. Do you remember that?
I do remember, but I still don't know the word.
It's décolleté. Décolleté.
Still don't
I
know
told-
the word.
What? Yeah, what is that?
Décolleté is what this. So we talked in a previous episode about facial care, and I said, well, you got to do your neck, and I call it your chest plate, but the word for this area is actually called décolleté, and I was nowhere near the D, and I tried a half a dozen times to make a word up, and I told my wife about it, and she nearly peed herself. So that episode will go up. Rich and I talked about my tan and how I need to make sure I moisturize, and that's right. Rich, you had
And
the little
sunscreen.
spot.
We talked about sunscreen for sure. Sunscreen.
I have derma repair, moisturizer, and sunscreen on, just for the record, and down to my décolleté. So that's a real thing. Um, anyways, any woman that listens to that episode about facial care is gonna be very disappointed in all of my butchering of the phonetics around facial care, but that's okay. Why don't we get into Frank? You introducing yourself, because I don't know if I could really summarize it. I know you from Herman Miller, and we tried to come in and steal you from Rich several years back. I think it was right after you got bought, Rich, and we thought we could come in and take over their managed services, but quite honestly, it wasn't our best showing and our best day. And obviously, Rich knows you all the way back to Jarden, and then
To
Newell,
Jarden, yeah.
and then Miller. So, Frank, why don't you take a few minutes and kind of tell us, because you've literally been in the industry like as long as I have.
Making me feel old, TJ, but yeah, sure.
You look better than the two of us. We have a lot more gray, though. I mean, you're looking pretty good.
Yeah, my wife doesn't like the facial hair, so I don't. If I grew it in, it'd be just as gray as yours, though. You can see it in the sides.
I think it makes you look distinguished.
Yeah, that's what they say, right? But yeah, I'm Frank DeMaria. Thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate this. I am currently the vice president of digital engineering and platforms at Miller Knoll, which for those of anybody out there that doesn't know the Miller Knoll name, we're really a collective of 18 brands, really focused on design and designing spaces for home, office, and everything in between. We're most known for furniture and furnishings with brands like Herman Miller, Knoll, and Design Within Reach. I've been in this role for almost 5 years now, and lead a team primarily of software engineers, but other technologists broadly across the organization. As you alluded to a minute ago, prior to joining Herman Miller, I spent 16 plus years at what started as Sunbeam Products, moved into Jarden, and was then acquired by Newell. So a lot of M&A acquisition there. And that's really where I got started with Demandware at the time, and how Rich and I first met. That was a really great long opportunity where I was. In 2012, we decided to move to Demandware at the time. And Rich, I'm not even sure if you know the full story here, but
I don't know if I do. Yeah.
yeah. So when we were Jarden at the time, I was a new manager, right? So when we did the RFP for commerce, I had a seat at the table, but I wasn't the decision maker there. But it was a really exciting time. We were trying to grow our commerce business overall, made the decision to go Demandware, and then we started looking for partners. And Demandware recommended three of the big guys, right? And they came in and did the whole pitch and everything, and we just didn't like it, right? It just didn't feel right. Um, so we didn't know what demand we were. We had just been doing a lot of research and stuff, and I remember finding it was a white paper or a press release on Lions Consulting Group launching MMA Warehouse on on demandware. And that's where it started. And I said this to my boss, who I'm sure you remember, Rich, and I was
Sure.
like, we should check these guys out. They seem like a smaller company, and he made the connection, and I mean the rest is history, right? Like you came in, Aaron Eversole came in
Yeah.
and sold that deal, and
It
I
was
mean,
great. And I mean, Renee was great. Marianne's great. I
yeah,
mean, you had a great team there too. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
you were
The
great
leadership team there
too, but yeah,
was awesome. We had
yeah.
great support from leadership, and then Aaron basically lived in Boca for like 2 years after that as we were going through. Who's one of my favorite people, by the way.
He's amazing. He's one of my favorite
Um,
people too. I mean, you guys
yeah,
had like you had a wedding shower for him, I think, right?
we did. Yeah, yeah, we had a lot of fun. And after that, I mean, we launched 25 brands in a year with you guys, and then we moved internationally. And Aaron and I traveled Canada, UK. We spent a lot of time together over those few years while I was there. Um, then Jarden got acquired by Newell. We expanded it more. We got to work with some amazing brands, like Rawlings Baseball, Coleman Camping, Yankee Candle, etc. So it's been an amazing journey. TJ, as you said, I started in this industry, a long time ago. I was still in college, when I really got like into the industry. Fumbling around a little bit, not really sure where I would be or what I really wanted to do, and loved technology, loved arts. Started, at a small agency, doing bottom of the barrel stuff. Like I was cropping images for a website, doing some basic data entry, some basic, HTML coding and things like that. That's kind of like where I got started. And but the majority of my career has been on the, as you said, retail, on the client side per se, retailers, brand manufacturers. That first job I had early on, I spent a couple of years at like a small agency, but the rest of it's really just been there. And really acquisitions aside, I've been in three roles. Like I've been in three, I should say three companies, for that entire career. So for me, I love settling in. I'm loyal maybe to a fault, but I love that.
There's no
How'd you
such
end up
thing as
getting to
loyal to
Jarden?
a
How'd you
fault.
get to Jarden? Sorry, TJ.
Hold on. There's no such thing as loyal to a fault. We gotta
Nice.
dispel that myth right there.
Yeah,
So
when you're talking to two of us, I agree with that. No such thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. So, Rich, I was in New York at the time. And honestly, I chased a girl to Florida, which is where Jarden was. Um, it's 18 years later almost. Next month will be 18 years. So it worked. But yeah, I was working up there and looking to make the move to Florida and sent out some resumes, had a couple interviews, went down, interviewed, and
That's great.
got the job. And it was super early on, right? Like we were Sunbeam Products at the time. We were insourcing the web development, classic ASP back then, right? Building out sites for Oster, Sunbeam, Mr. Coffee. It was a ton of fun. It was a
Yeah,
great role, great people.
That's great.
fa- Fast
Oh, I
and
forgot to
Furious.
mention him. I got to say one thing. I forgot to mention, or I'll get punched. Gertrude and I just had 34 years
Wow, congrats.
on the 23rd, so on Sunday. Yeah.
It's kind of funny because when you're in there doing stuff like that, Frank, you essentially are like an agency, right? It's an agency feel, it's multiple brands, it's a common architecture.
Yeah,
Dude, classic ASP and ASP.NET and all of that, that's pretty funny.
you
But
remember those days,
um,
right?
oh, of course I do. Dude, I
Yeah.
started doing HTML1. Well, I started as a modeler and animator, and then I had to learn like lingo in Macromedia Director. But I remember I hated the web. It was like image on the left, image on the right, and when style sheets came out, but I had to do all the same thing. I was cropping thousands of images and writing like HTML1, HTML2, like super super juvenile. So, but Frank,
Yeah.
so were you a developer in the early stages of Jarden
Yeah.
when you were doing those sites? So you actually came up. You
Yeah.
literally are and were a developer. So there's nobody kind of bullshitting you in the stack when you're talking with SIs or other partners or things like that. You kind of know what's going on. You still have that appreciation for the practitioner side.
I do. Yeah, I mean, I spent the first, I don't call it half of my career, really, to this point, being very hands-on. And it was then a slow progression, right? Like even, when Rich and I first met 12 years ago, I was new to a manager role. I was leading a small team, but I was still very hands-on at the time, so that player coach for a while, and that lasted for a while. And then, as you continue to grow and take on more scope, some of that, you lose some of that. I always like to say, like, I can get into the weeds. I tell my team, you probably don't want me there, but I can, and I like it sometimes. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I grew up, being hands-on.
Yeah, I love that. I never got away from being a practitioner or having the ability to kind of dumpster dive as needed to help people out and problem solve and things like that. But yeah, I always said, if if we're using my ideas, then stuff's a little sideways, on the
Yeah.
technical side. But so what's the
TJ, do
day
you
in the
remember?
life for you now? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Before we jump into that, do you remember how you and I met?
I don't actually. I remember us
So
trying to get work from you, and I think we
yeah,
started with a simple homepage project, and it was pretty disastrous, quite honestly.
we did a small project. But I remember the first time I no look. I mean, being in the Demandware for this long, like everybody knew of TJ. You see him larger than life, right? And I don't
I have
remember
no
when it
idea.
was. Rich, maybe you'll remember, but the first time I met you, TJ, I was in Chicago, and Rich and I were having breakfast somewhere. We met for coffee,
Which
and
Scott?
some conference. And
No, Scott wouldn't have been involved. Yeah, it's probably just Frank
No.
and I.
it was just the two of us. And Rich said, "I don't know if you know TJ, but he's gonna come and meet us here." I'm like, "All right." So we're chatting for a while, and then in walks this enigma, right? Like this person you've always heard of, you've always seen, but never sits down, and you
Legend. Yeah.
this may have been pre-beard, Rich, and it was like
Oh, for
early in the
sure, it
time.
probably
But
was. Yeah.
I sat back and was like in awe, and it's really these podcasts have reminded me of like that day, because I get to listen into the conversations, because you guys were just chatting almost as if I wasn't even there. I was just like listening in, talking about Rich's tattoos, and it was early in that time, and it was
You
just
want?
super interesting. And I was like, again, I was just in awe of the two of you, these two legends sitting in front of me, chatting. It
Just
really is just about
bullshitting,
life.
right?
And again, that's what I've been loving about these podcasts, watching them religiously, just again like peering into the lives of these two icons of the industry.
Oh, thank you, Frank.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I actually remember that meeting because it was coffee. It was at the coffee shop, right? And there was like these
Yeah.
couches sort of facing
Yes.
each other. And what's
Yes.
interesting about that you bring that up, Frank? That was the first time I had ever traveled to go hang out with Rich ever outside of a PAB meeting. Like that was the first time I ever like left my hotel. It was actually, I think it was, I don't know if we had changed it to connections yet. I think we still thought it was kind of exchangey. Might have been even IRCE, but I had to come all the way downtown. And that was
I think it
literally, Rich, I don't know if
was.
you remember that. It was actually, we were talking, it was after I talked you out of getting a tattoo in Vegas during PAB. And it was the first time, and I was scared shitless to go downtown and walk into a meeting where Rich was in there with a customer and just like sit down and shoot the shit. That I was so uncomfortable, and I do remember you there, and I
It didn't
remember us
show,
talking about
TJ. It did
trying
not
to do your
show.
tattoo. Yeah, I'm
Yeah, because
a
I mean, you
master
probably heard that
guy.
story in the other one where Yeah, TJ talked me out of after a pab in Vegas getting a tattoo. So we were probably talking about getting the tattoo because I probably didn't have it yet. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah, no,
can't
we were
remember if
talking
you had
about
like
what
just
you wanted
gotten
to do.
one or yeah, there was a lot of conversation about that. You were going to New Hampshire to go to TJ's guy to get a tattoo.
That's right. I had designed. I actually didn't. I show up with a folder with the artwork in it. Rich, I think that's when I
I
showed
think
you
you may
the
have.
artwork that I did.
That's good memory. You guys have better memory than I do. That's awesome.
No, you have memories that I don't remember of pabs and things like that. But the funny story, Frank, is we're all at a pab in Vegas and they're like chanting for Rich to go to some random tattoo artist in Vegas with under
Oh
my
no.
guidance and get a giant back tattoo. And I'm like, we are not like running to some scab tattoo artist in the middle of Vegas at 10 o'clock. Because, by the way, it took 2 days. That was the other part Rich didn't know. But, and the whole room was like, wait a minute, TJ is the voice of reason in a group of 20 in Vegas to not take Rich for a tattoo. Something, there's been
Everyone wanted to go watch. It was
Something's
crazy.
wrong.
there's been a shift in the atmosphere of the world after that. So, but you did. You came to Dover, New Hampshire, and spent 2 days in, and I remember that.
Well, I've
That's
now
amazing.
it's been like 6 days in now.
Yeah, well, you went and did the whole. So, Frank, what you haven't seen is Rich's entire arm now. So he's got the one on the back. He's got
You
one on
saw
his
it, didn't
chest.
you? I think.
Rich,
Have
take
you
your
seen
shirt
it?
off.
I
Rich, take your
No,
shirt
he
off.
probably saw it. No, he saw
Rich,
this. Like
take your shirt
you
off.
got a
yeah.
commercial. No, I'm not
I've
taking my
seen it.
shirt off. I think
I've seen
he's
it.
seen it. Frank's seen it since then because it's been a
Yeah.
I
while
think
now.
we need to see the we. Rich, I'll play some music. Will you just take your shirt off?
No, I'm good.
All right.
Yeah,
So
'cause
anyway,
TJ, I just saw Rich at Connections.
Yeah.
And we were sad that you weren't there.
I tried to get
the
him to
thing
come,
is,
but he wouldn't come. No, Frank and I, we were at a Cubs game on a rooftop, so he's seen the tattoo.
yeah, I had written that post, and that had really started a brush fire that burned about 25,000 acres. And I just didn't want to. I just didn't want to stress anybody out. Frank, did you read the original one, or did you read the one where I
I
said have your
did.
pick? All right, so you know I
No,
changed it.
I got the original one. I didn't know
Oh,
you changed it until Rich told me you changed it because I only saw the original one.
yeah, yeah. No one would call me and ask. Well, I got a lot of phone calls and pats on the back, but no one that was critical of it would reach out to me. They reach out to the people around me and said, "Can you convince them?" Because they all know.
They reach out
But
to Rich.
anyways, I
No,
was
they
gonna go up
called
and
Eric.
call.
Yeah.
Well, the reality is one of my boys was graduating from a program that he was in on Thursday, and I couldn't risk being out there and missing a flight and not being at his
Right.
thing on Thursday. That's actually the reason. That's half of the reason. The other half is I didn't want Eric to have a stroke when I showed up unannounced. So, I still love him to death. Actually, Dode and I golfed on Friday. We hung out for like 5 hours for the first time in quite a while, actually. So,
I saw
um,
that picture.
yeah, it was awesome. And the dude in the picture was our very first photographer when we were just getting started in 94, 95. Like in January of 95, Brian came into the office, and I actually have the shit here in the back, and shot all of our original brochureware and stuff like that. Back when you
Wow.
thought it was cool to like touch a monitor with a finger because touchscreens had just come out in this old clunky CRT. But anyways, it was good. We golfed and he did great. It was his first time out on the course, and he shot amazing. But anyways, Frank, back to you and kind of dovetailing back into your intro. So you've done a lot. You've been a practitioner, you've been a developer, you've done production work, which is kind of funny because we've all kind of gone through that. Like today, you're running. How big of a squad are you running right now? Like ish, are you running 25 people, 75 people, 150 people?
Yeah, my team's around 200.
Oh my God.
It's
Okay.
yeah,
All engineers?
it's pretty broad. It's not all engineers. I'd say the majority is engineers.
Yep.
But I look after our team, our technology team in India as well.
Good.
So between my team here in the US and my team in India, it's pretty sizable.
That's
And again, a
amazing.
lot of it's hands-on software engineering, but then there's associated things like, quality assurance is a big team that we have,
Hmm.
and other roles like that. But all technology.
Are you all in-house now, or do you still have partners, SIs?
Yeah, it's a mix, so it depends on the technology, right? So I
Yep.
know, when we talk specifically about like the Salesforce Commerce Cloud world, we're 100% internal now.
Yep.
When I started 5 years ago, we were 100% reliant on external, and
Yep.
we were working with Capgemini at that time.
Hmm.
And but like, for us, and it's kind of been a mentality that I've had throughout my career is really for the important pieces of technology that you have, you need at least a level of ownership internally. So it's always good to have amazing partners and that you can call on because you'll never staff for the peaks and specific expertise and things like that. But to run a platform that you're doing hundreds of millions of dollars through, that's really important. Like you need to be able to control your own destiny. So we did that transition on that platform specifically, but we've done it across other systems as well. But I can't say that 100% we don't rely. Like we have some platforms that, we're not really investing in. They're just, sort of keeping the lights on. So we're not
Yep.
hiring internally for them. Like we have a lot of things. Like we have a bunch of projects that go on across a bunch of different systems. My scope now is pretty broad. So we have a lot of different, platforms across the organization and, some big projects that we bring in resourcing for. So it's a bit different. It's a little mixed depending.
I like I like that. I appreciate that. I appreciate that level of detail too, because a lot of folks, there's been a big shift in the last several years in where the ownership is, right? And competency and being able to kind of do your own thing and have control of your destiny. And I love it. I love that we've
Yeah.
institutionalized commerce to the point where brands are actually able to justify actually having headcount and having SMEs and getting tenure. Because, when you're an agency and we come in, you're basically just skimming all the cream of the ideas off. We don't really have a lot of the institutional knowledge that you need to be productive. And I love the move for brands bringing in-house staff in. I actually wish more would do it, but we were talking in a couple of episodes ago that like it's real hard to find like a real good like proper CDO, and it's real hard for the organization to understand what's required.
Yeah.
Who is your so how do you handle the experience side of it and sort of the UX and the design systems and pattern languages and things like that? Like, do you have a peer that
We
is
do. I
outside
do.
of the tech?
Yeah. Yeah. So, actually, we're still reporting into the technology team. I have a peer of mine that leads digital product as well as user experience and
Love
research.
that. I love that.
She specifically is amazing. Her team is really good, and they're sort of similar, right? So we have an internal team that does design, and then for some things they'll contract out if there's a need or if there's just too
Yep.
much. But
Yep.
we lead that internally. And quite honestly, for a brand like ours that is so design heavy from a like physical product perspective, it's really important that we translate that online.
Do
Cool.
you guys have you guys I don't want to say matured to, but do you guys have like a molecular pattern language and standard interface library that you can kind of reskin but is common between all the brands? I don't know what the proper term is. I call it sort of a molecular level sort of set of design patterns. But have you done that? Have you standardized? Because you have a lot of brands under leadership.
Yeah,
I got to assume there's some level of commonality underneath it all.
I would say yes and no. We have across some brands and in some capacities.
Hmm.
We haven't done it as well as we would like broadly across all brands and across
Yep.
all platforms because we still sit on a bunch of different platforms. As a company who grew up through acquisition, we still have a lot of
Yeah.
different technology in place and things like that. So we've done some of it. We'd love to do more of it, but we have a design system and component library and things like that we try to use, and quite honestly, we just need to make sure we spend some more time on it.
Yeah, yeah. It's almost like a starting base, and everything sort of deviates off of that.
Yeah.
We were working on serializing Commerce Cloud when I was running engineering, and kind of coming up with this sort of serialized way of having the interface so that we could reskin something and show it and basically light up a demo in 5 minutes, right? Because
Right.
everything was basically done through serialization. and it's pretty amazing. And now with where Figma's going and where some of the tech is going and sort of the low code, no code stuff, it's been interesting. But I haven't
Yeah.
played with it in like 5 months. It's funny because I think I've been out for 5 months and I act like it's been 12 years, but
It moves
it's probably
fast.
not moving. Yeah, I don't know if it's moving. That yeah, it moves, but the problem is companies don't move fast, right?
Right,
So the tech
right.
is blazing ahead, but we were talking with Adam about some of this pop-up stuff and some of these sort of, overnight sensations and things like that that, most enterprises by the time they understand what it is, the moment's already moved past and it's kind of been commoditized. But so
Yeah.
what's a day in the life look like for you, Frank?
Yeah, to be honest, it's a lot of context shifting, right? Like my day, if I think broadly, like across my day, I'm up pretty early. I'm usually up between 5 and 5:15. Help get my daughter out the door. She's in high school, and then I'm working by 6:30. And I get in early. I like to because it's my time to like catch up on things because by 9 o'clock usually it's meeting after meeting. It's not often that I'll have, more than a break or two, in between things.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of, it's not a lot of heads down time during the day, right? You're going from one thing to the next. But my role, within my role, it's a lot of, I try to focus a lot on people. So it's like the leadership aspects of that, people engagement and everything. And then obviously it's a lot of technology, but more like technology on the strategy side, even architecture. But then, everything else that comes along with, a role like mine, like, budget aspects and vendor management and all things like that. But I'm constantly going from one thing to the next. And then, on the personal side, I cook most nights. So I try to wrap up, work between 5:30 and 6:30. Make food for the family and spend a little bit of time with them in the evenings and keep it low key. But you know, outside of work, both of my kids are pretty heavily involved in mainly sports, but other activities. And so like we're constantly running. So like tonight after work, it's right to a baseball game for my son. This weekend he's got a tournament, so we'll be traveling for. So it's a lot of things like that. But that's generally what a day looks like.
That's
Not very,
amazing.
maybe not as exciting as you would have hoped, but
No, dude, it's funny because Rich and I have talked about this before. I get more work done between 6:30 and 9 in the morning than I can do between 9 and 6 at night, right? Like the reality is that uninterrupted quiet time. And
yeah,
it's kind of funny because I ask because I always like to know how leaders segment their day, starting with family, focus time, the insanity of meeting itis, and
yep,
then back to your zen, right, which is cooking and feeding family. There's nothing more intimate and loving than feeding people. So I love that. I don't think a lot of the younger generation understand that most of the work that we did was done between 6:30 and 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, because after that it's kind of a shit show. So
right,
People are asking you for stuff. I mean, you can't plan that time. I mean, you're distracted, right? Yeah.
yeah,
well, you're as a leader, we're whether we want to admit it or not, we are servants to others. We're in meetings to keep other people out of meetings. Right? So it's kind of, we're sort of like, we're defensive ends in the business of
yeah,
brand building, so to speak. So
yeah.
on that, I mean, Frank, I have a couple of questions for you. Like, what advice would you have for that sort of next generation of leader that is struggling with, family, business, focus, self, right? Because Rich and I talk a lot about kind of you got to make yourself a priority. What do you have for some a little bit of sage advice for the up and comers?
Yeah, when I think about like my success and the history that I have, I mean, there's a few key things that I equate to that, but I never know if they work for everybody, right? Like we talked a little bit earlier about loyalty. Like loyalty is something that's worked for me. I'm a big proponent of it. I don't always necessarily advocate for it for others, but for me, it's worked. But like as part of that, but the things go hand in hand, right? Like I say hard work, and I feel like sometimes that gets a bad rap these days, but like, especially early in my career, like 60, 70, 80 hour weeks was not uncommon, right?
100%.
And I made sacrifices because of that. I missed things from a personal perspective. I wasn't great, about taking care of myself and necessarily taking care of my family at that time and things like that. And that's changed a bit over the years. Like, you know, I still put in the hours, right? Um, but I've learned to prioritize family a bit more as I've gotten older than I did early on. I was just trying to fight to get ahead, and I was always sort of, I've always kind of had that, um, I don't know, mentality of, like I don't belong, right? Like, so I was trying to like prove myself. And so because of that, like I did everything I could to prove my worth and prove my value. And honestly, not because I was looking to get ahead. I never had an aspiration when I started in my career that I needed to be a vice president or I needed to be a CTO or anything like that. Like I just wanted to do a good job, have an impact, and do fun and good work. Um, but I do think that some of those things, like for me, I think hard work was a a key component to that. I think flexibility is, like when we started the Demandware project, there were a lot of people on the team that didn't want to make that transition, moving from .NET. Everybody knows .NET. Jobs for .NET are plentiful. Like, what do you do there? I remember earlier in my career, we were doing an e-commerce implementation that we had to connect into a JD Edwards environment, green screen. Like nobody wanted to do that,
Nobody wants to do
right?
it today either.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
like, and I raised my hand. I'm like, I'll do that. And it just built on foundation, right? So like these things go hand in hand. And um, when I think about the loyalty piece I mentioned, right? Like for me, that's, I was given opportunities at organizations that I think helped allow me to stay in those organizations for a while. But I think these things build on each other, right?
Yeah.
Relationships is a key thing that I would say that I think people sometimes don't realize or take for granted. Build those relationships. Spend time when you don't need anything to build a relationship. That way, those relationships are strong when something happens and you do. And those relationships will provide benefits throughout your life. And for me, if I look about a key to success, I mean, I was just lucky in a lot of cases. Like luck is a huge component. And I say that because things happen that, like M&A happened at companies across my career that I think have really shaped my career. And I had nothing to do with those acquisitions. I mean, when I started here, we were just Herman Miller. And 2 years into that tenure, Herman Miller acquired Knoll. And that opened up a lot of opportunities for me that I could have never expected. Now, again, things go hand in hand. I was given some of those opportunities because of relationships that I had, because of hard work that I put in and things like that. But ultimately, like, luck in a lot of cases drove that. Um,
I think you underestimate the power of your effort and what you did. You don't go from being at a small agency cropping 1,000 images to Sunbeam to Jardin building dozens of sites and then Newell and then Herman Miller. I mean, I don't think like luck follows people. I think you're just a good dude and you're likable and you've always done good work. And I think the thing I found most interesting about you is that every time we have talked, whether it's on chat or when I was actually chatting with you when we were trying to get in and do work with you, you're just such a good dude. Like you're an authentic, just
100%.
regular guy that
thank
just
you.
happens to have this position where you get to do and touch a lot of things. And I think we need more people like that, to be honest. I think that's what drew Rich and I to trying to get you on the show is that, you know, on the outside you look like this sort of oracle of industry and you've got all of this body of experience, but you're just a good dude and you got a good vibe and you're a nice guy and you're fair and you don't find those three things, as often as we wish. We were just talking about this with Adam the other day about, you know, if it wasn't for this industry, some of my best friends and best network connections in the world, I mean, they're scattered everywhere. And I consider you
Yeah.
one of those guys. So I don't think you were lucky, dude.
Thank you.
I think the universe gave you exactly what you deserved and what you earned. And I've watched you from afar forever, dude. I mean, I know we only talk once a year, twice a year, three times a year, but you're definitely an icon in the industry on what we call on the SI side, which I don't even know if you guys know. We call you sort of a brand side leader or brand side innovator, and so. I think it's great, and I
Thank
think
you.
you're a rare dude. I think anybody that can study under you, or be led by you, or be led parallel to you, even the UX team that you're dealing with, and the digital product team would, you know, we need more folks like you out there, quite frankly, especially in that 20s and 30s and late 30s generation. So,
Wow.
Amen to
anyway,
I
that.
appreciate that.
yeah, yeah, you're one of the good, like you're one of the good ones. You always have been, and it's always struck me how easy it is to talk to you and how humble but genuine you are. So, I have to jump the fence here, and Rich, I got to ask one quick tech question. Is that okay?
Maybe, maybe. Watch out, Frank. He's
Frank,
gonna get too technical. He's gonna go
there's
Oh
deep.
been a
boy.
lot of
He's gonna go
well, I
deep
mean,
technical.
it's not going to go deep because I'm gonna preface it by let's not boil the ocean like we did with Adam. But Frank, you're in an interesting side because you're on the consume side, right? I mean, the consume side meaning every SI, every software company, every ISV is trying to prove how they can get you 20% ROI. You have a mix of old and new, right? You just said JDE. Like I have a dozen former clients that are still on JDE. Where are you guys in the journey from headed to composable and headless? Because I've got
It's a
to
great
assume
question.
you have a mix
Okay.
of experiments and well underway initiatives where you're kind of forced to play with these things in parallel, aren't you?
We
Essentially,
are.
to kind of because all the brands that you guys have acquired are at different parts of sort of the maturity continuum. So where's your head on this whole battle, and how do you on the brand side deal with this just constant barrage of messaging and salesmanship that you got to kind of you know throw everything out
Yeah.
and start with something different?
I would say for me, those are two very different things, right? So if I talk about the headless and headed architecture for a second, I would say we started making investments there, but slowly about 2 years ago. And ultimately, what we needed to do at the time is we were building the new corporate website for Miller Knoll. And it was not commerce related, but we had, I would call it a legacy platform, which still exists, by the way, that we could have chose to build our new Miller Knoll site on. Um, but we didn't think that was the right thing to do to keep building on a platform that we knew was going to, we wanted to start moving away from. So we looked at different options and decided on to build on, a more headless architecture and approach. We used Vercel with Next.js, brought in Contentful for a content management system, and
Yep.
we have that site up and running, and it's been running in production for about 2 years.
Good. How do you
We
like
are continue.
Contentful, real quick?
Good. I'm not super close with it, but the team has all good things to say about it. It's meeting our
Good.
needs at this time, at
Good.
least. We are starting to migrate a few more things off of some legacy platforms and onto that platform. So to date, though, all non-commerce. If I think about our B2C commerce, we're still SFRA, for the most part on SOCC. That's our North American business, at least. If I look broader than that, we have other systems as well, but that is still very much SFRA. We have aspirations of potentially bringing those things together at some point, but we haven't taken the leap. We've recently launched within the past year, we launched B2B on Salesforce. And, our B2B is, as you would probably expect, a little bit more closed off. It's not, not anybody can just come in and view that. But what we're trying to do is pull that platform closer together with our corporate site to be able to show within our corporate environment a broad set of product content across our organization. And so with that, we are starting to dabble in, and I would call it, as you said, like POC a bit, how to bring the headless architecture that we have with the B2B non-headless approach that we have to be able to show product content in a headless manner. So we're trying to like tie those things together. And we think if we do that and do that well and prove that out, then we have B2C, I would call it aspirations, to do more with that on B2C. So it's a very slow approach for us, which you could argue may have some pros and cons, but that's how we've been approaching it.
Yeah, I love that. And I like the idea of experimentation on the B2B side, right? Because it doesn't have the same expectations that we do on the B2C side. It's a different flex. And I assume you're on the new B2B, right? Commerce Cloud B2B,
Yeah.
which is a great product. We have a very large, they do. The other company has a large B2B practice. I say everything's still in the first person, but
Yeah, that's okay.
I like that. I mean, we have been encouraging brands for years to think in more of a composable mind frame, right? And,
Yeah.
get things off of the commerce platform that are not native to commerce. And even though you can make it do 17 things, that was the beauty of it, it shouldn't do those things. So that our move has been take a strategic long-term look and start peeling these things off that are not central to the system. And then when you decide to mature the system, you have a lot more options. And then you're just moving the thing that it does instead of all the other shit that you customize around, over 10 years, which is essentially the technical debt that most people are dragging with them. But I like that.
Yeah,
That's a good answer.
It's hard because when we think about it, and we have a lot of excitement internally around the headless architecture, there's a lot of support from the development team specifically. They like working in that environment.
Yeah.
But it's hard to say stop what we're doing on B2C. We're going to spend the next year converting to headless. It's hard to do that. So we're looking at, how do you take incremental approaches and how do you step into it? And I know there's been a lot of chatter across the industry lately about more hybrid approaches and starting somewhere and taking it slow and finding wins and proving it out and moving on. And so we're doing more of that. We just haven't gotten into B2C quite yet.
It's funny. Were you in the loop? One of your architects contacted me. Somebody recommended me to him a few years ago. It might have even been just early COVID days about this idea. I've always had this idea of a ubiquitous UI that was, it didn't care if you were B2B or B2C or just corporate website, and it was really credential based and sort of this idea of a pattern language. All right, Rich. Those are my
That's
that's
your
it for my
technical. That's
question.
as far as you're going. No, that's cool.
Yeah.
I got to do a commercial. You see this chair? I mean, come on, Frank, right there.
Oh yeah,
Aaron,
absolutely.
favorite chair ever.
Good.
So
Thank you.
I have you beat on the Aeron chair. When they were initially released, which was 29 years ago? Is that 28 years ago? It was the first thing for work that I bought with my own money. They were $1,000 when they first came out, $9.99 I think, and I still have it. It's actually still in my office at Pixel Rafter One right now. I just haven't emptied. But by the way, my office is still my office. But I have an original. Dude, it all works. I have an original Aeron from 95, 96 maybe. I'm trying to think where we were. I think I was downtown Portsmouth, so it would have been 95, 96. And it's all the stuff still works. It's covered in dust and everything. But even the little back support thing that's movable is still on there.
Good. Yeah, there's a new one now. It's funny, Frank. I was just in the Design Within Reach in Chicago. Just like last week, because I bought a chair. We're rehabbing a house in Ireland, right? So I'm like, I need my chair. So we're going to figure out how to ship it over there. And we went in there, and I'm like, I need this chair, just a new one. And they have a different back support thing now that's better than this old, lumbar one that moves up and down. And my wife picked a chair, too. For some reason, she doesn't love the Aeron. She picked another, probably more expensive chair, but she loves it. But I'm hot all the time. So this, you can get air through this chair. and I love it. I hang out in it. Like, she's like, why do you sit in that chair all the time? I'm like, it's comfortable for me.
I love it.
It is.
So it's going to Ireland. Here's your commercial. We're going to ship like 2 chairs because you guys don't ship, I don't think, internationally. So we're going to ship it over there or freight forward or whatever. So it'd be
Amazing.
great.
Yeah,
That's
the
amazing.
quality is certainly impressive. We have a really fun. It's fun to watch. We have a test lab at our headquarters in West Michigan, and I just love going in there because they really do, like, they test out these products. They stand behind the quality, and
She almost bought a gamer chair. Like, she sat in that thing, like, you know,
those are nice.
and
Yeah.
she's like, this thing is so comfortable. But I think our designer, James, I think he talked her into buying like a leather one that looked nicer, you know. So she did get like a leather chair. And then we bought the, what's the classic? We bought one of the Eames. Is it Eames?
Did you buy
Ames?
the lounge? The Ames
Yeah.
lounge? Oh
Like
yeah, that is
Like, isn't that what, like the
Yeah.
old school designed leather? We bought one of
the
those
Ames,
for
the Ames lounge and ottoman.
Yeah, we
Mid-
bought one of
mid-
those too to go to Ireland. So that's going to be in my
Amazing.
office in Ireland. Like, come on, that's classic,
I
right?
need pictures of that when you're
I'm
ready.
totally going to send you pictures. It's going to be awesome.
That's great.
I love the comeback of all the mid-century stuff. I've that couch
Yeah.
behind me. I don't know if you guys can even see it. Is like a Sinatra era couch. I've got some furniture down here as well. I love the mid-century stuff. So, but again, I still have the same hair I had when I was 18. So, a little less of it, but it is what it is.
And then I just wanted to comment. Let me comment on what you were saying, Frank. Which, you know, when you talk about relationship, I mean, I do think. I mean, I think it's important, and that's what life is all about. But I just, you know, to even acknowledge you, like every time we talk, like we have a personal conversation, right? We talk about families, we talk about what we're doing. You know, maybe we get to business, but not really. Like, I just like talking to you, right? So I think that people should listen to what you said about how important relationships are, right? And I appreciate you for that. And that's why it's always fun to get together, right? I always feel good, you know, being with you. And I don't think people put as much value on that. So I just wanted to acknowledge you, but acknowledge what you said. And hopefully people were listening, right? And of course, hard work. You know, none of us would have gotten where we are without working hard. And you can outwork other people. You can, right? But you have to want it, you know. So, but I just wanted to double click on the relationship. And I kind of want to hear the story of how you met your wife and how you chased her down to Florida. Like, that's probably a story. I don't know if we hear it now, but that sounds like a story.
We'll have to. We'll get Frank back on and do some shorts. And
Okay.
We'll do a relationship, a whole one on relationship. I mean, we should do one on relationship.
We should do like nothing about work. Like, you know what I mean? Just get into deep topics.
You guys did this short on, what'd you call it, relationship health, or what'd you?
Yeah, what's your
Yeah, we did.
relationship maintenance? Rich, what you don't know is
Yeah.
that was a full podcast we were trying to do, and it got busted, and so I only did a short, and the only thing that was good in the whole thing was we're going through the podcast, and Rich like interrupts me, and he goes, "Hey," I go, "What?" He goes, "What's your relationship maintenance like?" And I was like, "What?" He goes,
Yeah,
"What's
because
your
we were
relationship?"
talking about like working out and stuff. I'm like, okay, well, how about relationship maintenance, like dates, you know, all that. So we went deep. It was great.
Yeah,
I think we
you
need to
guys
get the
are-
wives on. We need
Oh,
the wives
boy.
on.
We might be in big
Count me out of
trouble.
that one.
We might be in
Yeah.
big trouble with Gertrude and Shannon on. We might be busted.
It's been a big request is to have the girls on with us. I don't think I'm comfortable doing that. I'm not sure I can. I'm not sure I can do that. There's work me, and then there's husband me, and they're not the same guy. So
I think it'd be great. I mean, you'd get busted out, you know, because I mean, you know, Frank, like I've talked about this on a bunch of podcasts, but you know, everyone only thought of Club TJ, right? Like,
Right.
oh, he's the guy who's out partying, he's got table service, and he and Adam and those guys would be fucking texting me and calling me at 3 a.m. Hey, we got a cranberry juice for you at the club. Come on out, Nava. You know, but then you get to know him. Back to what you said, Frank, relationship. And he's a father, right? He's a lover. He's got a huge heart. And I think you're the same way, Frank. And we should do another one on relationships and just the importance of family because, you said something else that I think we would all say. Like, there are some sacrifices early in your career. Like, I started a business. I had a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I'm going all in on business, right? And you say sacrifice, but it's not a full sacrifice. It's not like my kids didn't get to know me. Like, I made sure that I spent time, just like you're saying. You're going to baseball games. You're doing stuff. So how do you? Maybe it's another one to talk about working hard, but also valuing the things that are important too. But
Well,
good stuff.
God, that's an interesting topic, because I almost wonder if there's missable moments that we just, like, they're 3 and 5, or they're 4 and 5, or they're 1 and 2, and, like, when they're 9, 10, and 12, the time you spend with them, the imprint is a little bit longer lasting. So I wonder
Well,
if there
people
is a
told me you
window.
couldn't have both. Like, when I started my business, right? They said you can't have both. You
Yeah.
can't have a family, and you can't really be successful in business. You're going to have to back off on business and not be as successful to focus on your family, or you're going to be super successful and your family's going to hate you and you're going to get divorced. And I was like, fuck that. I'm going to have both, right? I mean, come on. Like,
Yeah, I
we're
didn't have
examples of it.
I got
Yeah.
divorced, but getting divorced made me a better father, and made me a better human, and probably single-handedly saved my life as a professional. So,
Yeah,
but
I went through a few years though, Rich, probably when you and I first met, where it was out of the house before the kids were up, home after they were asleep, and weekends I tried to protect, but
Right.
like, and again, like I can look back and I can say what worked or what didn't work for me or what my advice would be to others, but like that's just the reality of what I did at that time, and
Yep.
um, again, it all plays against each other.
Absolutely.
yeah, I think there's something to be said for finding moments where because ultimately we had to get comfortable with ourselves and what we were doing and the decisions we made. And there's nothing like, I don't think people talk enough about the regret we have as dads and as husbands and
Yeah.
as parents, and about the moments that we do miss and we have to miss. And, like, that's a whole other emotional dialogue that I could talk for an hour
And
on.
I mean, and I kind of had to go for quality
Right.
of time because I wasn't going to put in quantity. I mean, but
Yeah.
I made sure it was quality. I wasn't on my phone. I was present, right? And I think that, that made a difference, I think, with my girls.
Frank, we want to give you a chance to ask us some questions,
Yeah.
if you have any. Don't
I
feel
do.
obligated.
I have tons.
You've listened to all the episodes. You know that some people have none, and some people take the entire episode away from us
Yeah,
and ask us questions. But anything while you have us
I
that
do. I'd actually
you-
want to start with Rich. So, Rich, I think on the last podcast, I didn't know much about your history prior to forming Lions. And I think you said that you worked through like two major like bankruptcies before then.
Yes.
What's the history there? Like I didn't know that piece of your history.
Yeah. So I mean,
hold on. We are finally going to get to the 2008 storyline that we've been.
no, that
the-
one's not even there. That's not, that one we're not quite to, because he's
Yeah,
talking
but
about before
met,
Lions.
No, he met you in 2012, though.
No,
And
but
in the
he's
podcast,
talking-
you were talking about the 2008 issue, weren't you?
No, but he's talking
Or
about
is there a different one?
pre-Lions. Pre-Lions,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
went through $2 billion with a B dollar bankruptcy. So that's the dot-com boom and bust. So, I mean, I worked in, I came out as an engineer, so not a lot of people know I was computer science, right? Double E computer science. So I actually, knew how to program and stuff. And I used to, just like you said, Frank, I used to threaten my guys at Lions, like, hey, I'm going to start coding if you guys, and they're like, yeah, right, whatever. Never wanted to do that. But I went to Kellogg and I came out. Then I started working for a company called Whitman Hart in 1995. And we went public in 96. We opened a Grand Rapids office, which is really funny. And I was part
Oh,
of that. But we did this acquisition of US Web CKS. Remember that time where everything was going crazy, right? Like, it was the dot-com boom. And so we did this acquisition, became $1 billion company with 10,000 employees, and we named it March 1st, because it was established on March 1st, and we had a Super Bowl ad, and I mean, we paid
You were
$50 million.
part of the whole thing? I
Pardon me?
remember all of that. I
No,
remember all of that.
we paid $50 million to come up with that name March 1st. I'm like, I could have come up with that name for $5. Like, just pay me. No, so I was part of that, TJ. So we did that, and 1 year later we were bankrupt. So think of that. We combined, like,
Wow.
the problem was US Web CKS was like 50 independent agencies, design agencies, and then you had Whitman Hort, which was a Midwest-based consulting firm. So on paper, it looked great. Like, we're in the Midwest, and they had the coast. They had Mitchell Madison, this high-end strategy. They're doing Audi commercials, like, for real, like Audi commercials for television. And we'd bring these guys into the Midwest to a manufacturing company that just wanted a website. And they'd be like, we don't need, like, an Audi ad. Like, it just wasn't quite the match. But then, the market dropped out. Like, if you think about what we had going on, we were doing Y2K stuff. We were doing, remember, AS400. We were doing sign-on stuff. We're, mainframe. We're changing the dates from 2 digits to 4 digits. Like, people aren't even going to remember that stuff. And then we're doing e-commerce, well, the early days of, .com. And then the market dropped out, right? Dropped out. So that was the first bankruptcy. $1 billion, 10,000 employees. So then we get acquired by Divine. Do you remember Divine? Divine Interventures bought Whitman Hart / March 1st out of bankruptcy. And then Flip, Andrew Filipkowski here in Chicago, Flip started buying all kinds of companies out of bankruptcy for pennies on the dollars, right? Tons of software companies. So I was always services side. He was buying all these software companies, and then he bought a hosting company called Data Return. So it was a great idea, kind of ahead of his time. Let's do software, let's do hosting, and we'll do services, and we'll crank with that. And then he had this idea about portals. Let's control the data. Let's do portals. He bought this company. And then he overextended, and then we went bankrupt. So another seriously $1 billion company. And in 2003, I got a call like, today's your last day. And I think this is the chair. You're going to laugh. Take your chair, take a printer, really? Like I took like an HP 4 Plus or whatever, put it on my chair, like just wheel it out and take it with you. And I think this is the chair. And that was the end of Divine.
So your Aeron chair was your severance?
It was. And my printer. I don't think I have that HP 4 Plus anymore, but
I'm sure the printer doesn't work anymore. The Aeron chair, I'm sure does.
The chair is great. The chair is perfect. So that was the second, $1 billion bankruptcy. And then I was just sitting there. I didn't have a job. I mean, first time probably in my life where I was like, I don't have a job. And I have 2 young kids. And I kind of got to get busy, right? So I was interviewing, and I thought I was going to do something else, and still in the industry, and I thought I'd run a Chicago office for someone or do this or that. And in the meantime, think about it, like I had a bunch of clients because I was running sales for services in Chicago, and I knew a bunch of customers, and I knew a bunch of consultants, and people were calling me, hey, we could use this, we could use that, and I'd call someone, I'd be like, okay. And the guy would be like, okay, pay me 80. And I'd call the customer. I say, I'll give them to you for 100. And I hung a shingle, and I was like, I'm not going to do this forever, but I just want to help people. So I'll just do the staff aug thing and like connect people, and let's do that. And then after, 6 months, when I was getting some offers and stuff, but it was like I was going to do the same thing, but for no equity. And so I was kind of like, well, maybe I'll just keep going. And I talked to Dave Barr. He worked for me at Divine. And I called Dave. I'm like, hey, you want to come over with me? We'll do this new company thing. And so he came over, and that was the start.
Wow.
Crazy, right? Like you said, things kind of happen for a reason. I mean, I love what you said about being lucky, because I say that a lot. I'm lucky. I mean, it's timing. It's the way things happen. I always knew I wanted to have my own company, but I didn't think I was ready. Like at that time, I did not think I was ready. And then stuff happens, and then you become ready.
Right.
So when did you start that, Rich? When did you pull Dave over?
2003, March of 2003.
So it was 2 years later you somehow met Stefan, and that's when I met you, was in the spring of 05 in the Demandware
that's when we
office.
started doing Demandware, exactly. So how it happened, though, was I told this story. I think it was Playboy. So I was doing stuff with Scott, right. My buddy Scott at Playboy. Playboy chose Demandware, and then Scott's like, hey, you should check out this, so it was through Scott, you should check out this platform, Demandware. And then, Philip Jefferson was in there and they were going to implement Playboy. And Scott's like, no, Lions know, because we were doing work at Playboy. He's like, they know our infrastructure. They've done some business intelligence with us. They're going to do the implementation. And of course, Demand was like, no way. And Philip's like, no, the time frame's too tight. They're not trained. They're not doing it. And then Scott goes, well, then I'm not doing demand work. So they're like, well, okay, maybe Lions can do it. So that was our first implementation. And I mean, honestly, I didn't know Demandware, so I didn't meet Stefan. Like you said, it was through Playboy that we were like, they did their own selection process and they came up with Demandware's the best platform for us. And then that's how we did our first implementation.
So when you came into training that day with me, you didn't know all of the leadership. You weren't dialed into all those guys. You were just
No.
a group that was trying to get up to speed to on
Totally.
Scotch.
I mean, I knew Philip, right? Like, remember,
Didn't
Philip
even
was
know that.
he was going to run that project. And so we were
Yep.
battling. And then I met Jameis because, I think it was IRCE. They had the Playboy Bunnies out after we launched that site. And Scott had a heart attack because that was
Yeah,
in
they
their
got in a lot of
contract. You
trouble.
can't do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then that
Well,
led
Booth
to nothing to do.
Bunnies is a mortal sin right now, anyway. So, see, Frank. That's a great question. I didn't know that story at that detail back then. When you kept talking about the financial challenges, I thought you were talking about the mortgage stuff, and that's a totally different story. And we'll get to that one day about It's amazing that some of us got down to basically hanging on with
Bare
two fingernails and made it through that stuff. But that's an awesome question, Frank. I appreciate you asking that. What else can we entertain you with today, Frank?
TJ, everybody wants to know what's next for you. It's been what, 6
You
months
didn't know
now?
Golf Pro. He's going on the tour. You didn't know that?
It's been 6
Yeah.
months, right? Like you were just talking to Vicky, I heard on maybe you want to teach. Like, is that a real thing? Like, what's happening, TJ?
I don't. I would love to teach and speak more. I don't think anybody. I think I think I'm too honest to probably catch a break doing any of that stuff. I'm not sure. I mean, truth be told, I don't think anybody thought I was going to last. I mean, the end of this month will be 6 full months on sabbatical, and I think the over under was I wasn't going to make it out of February, quite frankly. So, but golf season's here. No, I'm getting itchy. I'll probably start looking for something in the fall. The reality is that I would never go out and do anything that would put my business of 30 years, even though it's an IPG business now, in jeopardy. So I'll never work with another agency or other outside of an advisory role. So that kind of puts me on the product side, or it puts me on the brand side, or it puts me purely in an advisory or a consulting role. So
Yeah.
I don't know yet, Frank, to be honest with you. I probably, you had mentioned a little while ago, I suffer a little bit from imposter syndrome, and there's a part of me that worries that when I come out of my hidey hole and say, okay, I'm ready to do something, that nobody's going to want me to do anything. So that's probably my biggest sort of internal fear. But I just want to go do good things. I want to mentor people. I want to find that next generation of us, right? Like, think about the three of us. How many people do we know? And let's add Adam and JB and Nava and Portnoy and Lazoff and Alex Rosen, maybe some guys you don't know. I would like to help that next generation kind of settle in and get the kind of mentorship and leadership that they deserve, like half personal, half professional. But I don't know, dude.
Yeah.
I've actually thought, like, what do I do? Do I let a couple of headhunters know that I want to do something? Do I just call a couple of friends? Do I go through the Rolodex and start telling people that I'm kind of getting antsy? I could call PE and say, hey, what's the next hottest thing on the, what do you wish you were doing right now? Because I'm a weapon, right? I just need to be pointed in the right direction. But I don't know, to be honest with you. I'm going to try and stay out of the fray for another month or so. My 2-year anniversary is in the beginning of August, and then I'm probably going to try and catch a gig in the fall. And where, I don't know. I'd love to help a product company. I'd love to help a brand, but I don't I don't know if I could be fulfilled inside of a brand because my pace of movement is pretty intense, and I'm not sure, and I don't think the new up and coming brands, that's yet a completely different vibe and a completely different pace. But I don't know. I'll probably go out on LinkedIn and write an article and ask for suggestions on what should TJ do next.
I'd say advisor. I think you'd be a great advisor.
Yeah, TJ,
Yeah.
I've loved your stories on like how you've hired and what you've looked for and how you tried to find different people and like something about them that you believed in. And I've loved hearing stories like that and feel like in a role like that where you're guiding and mentoring, I think you could be fantastic.
I appreciate that. Again, I was just, a kid from the projects that, again, a lot of people, I mean, I'm a high school dropout that learned to got paid to draw. And, you talk about making friends and networking before you need them. Like, that's literally been my entire career, is just get to know as many people as you can and be friendly and be ethical and be a good person, because there's nothing more powerful than your network. And if you're listening to this, and if there's only one thing you do, it's not learn AI. It's not be a CDO or VP or an EVP. It's learn to network with ruthless intensity and authenticity. Not to network to ask for things, because I don't think I have a single person in my network that can say I've ever asked for anything, right? I don't do that. I'm constantly making deposits, but I like that. I think we actually need more of that, to be honest with you. Adam and Rich and I were just talking about, people can't believe how close we were as competitors. Like, we're on the PAB and we're literally all sort of the apex predators of our area, and we're like sharing recipes on WhatsApp, right? Like, that's actually what we're doing behind the scenes. So
We laughed. I mean, when you hear it, Frank, you laugh because there was a few people in the pab that we would watch them write down customer names. We were like, that fucker's going to call my customer. Like, because we would talk about stuff openly, but you'd watch people who don't say anything. They'd be like, we're like, oh shit, they're calling my customer.
yeah, it's interesting. Honestly, Frank, I just want to do good and pay it forward and help people and take some of
Amen.
the bad decisions that I've made, because I've talked. You'll see in Adam's podcast, which will go up next Thursday. Adam actually asked an interesting question, like, what do you know now that you didn't know as a young leader that you wish you knew then? And I got really deep and raw about, like you, like, I was a practitioner in a leadership role, and I actually owned the company. But at the end of the day, I was just a dude that knew how to do the work. And, how do you grow into that? And looking back, the things that I wish I was a little bit better at. So I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. I
Looking
wish I
forward to
did.
that
I'm thinking
episode.
about writing a book, to be honest with you. So
You should.
maybe I might get a ghostwriter involved and do almost a journal style like I do on LinkedIn, because that's
Right.
kind of my style of writing. But if you have any suggestions, feel free to send them to me. It's thomasaubrey@gmail.com. I'll take anything. And
Well, you know,
but
when I
no,
talk about relationships, I love making introductions. Now I do it, where I think there's mutual benefit.
yeah.
Um, I don't love the salesman side of that. Sorry, Rich.
That's okay. It's all good.
But like where there's like mutual benefit, I love being introduced to new people. I love having conversations with new people, and I love, matching up new people. And it's not always about like roles or jobs. It's just like, regardless
So
of that, like you two people should know each other.
I
No,
love
that's
that.
awesome.
And some of the most interesting people I've met in the last decade have been through these happenances. Alan Sang over at Skechers is literally the smartest human in the world I know, besides Adam Groves, Chuck Lavery, and JB. I don't know if you guys know Freddie Roseman over at Kind/Mars, but Freddie's this dude. The first time I met him, Michelle introduced me to him. Michelle, formerly of Kind and Logitech. And in 15 minutes of talking with this dude, I was exhausted. Like, he had so much energy and he was so bright. And years later, he ended up being a customer, and now he's just a good friend. But I agree, Frank. I think connecting is an underutilized skill, and connecting for purpose, which is, kind of an interesting thing there. So those are amazing questions. Frank, anything else you'd like to probe
Yeah.
Rich or I on?
Yep. Yep. How do you I have a list. I don't know how much time. I think we're gonna run out of time, but
We take as much
um,
time as you want. We can take 10 minutes, 15 or 30.
how do you guys, at this point in your career, not like the early on days, but like how do you maybe like two questions. How do you reset? Like when you just need to recharge, and then how do you deal with like failure when you feel like, yeah, and TJ, you said before, like yeah, you feel like you're an imposter, but like when you actually feel like you didn't succeed.
Yeah.
Look, and we
Rich,
both
what you
pause. You see, like TJ and I both pause to see like who's going first, because then you get to
Rich,
thinking.
We in honor of you going first like three times. You want me to start?
Go ahead.
So reset. So when you say reset, Frank, do you mean like how do I just like shut down and recharge my batteries, whether I do that in a day or a weekend or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, if
Um,
you're having a bad
yep,
day or just exhausted, like what does it for you?
yep. Well, it's funny because you already said it. So cooking
Okay.
is a zen moment for me. So I cook. I
Yeah.
cook 95% of the meals in this house.
Same.
Last night I like literally took a top round and par thawed it and like cut it into little 1/4 inch cubes and made a marinade. And my kids loved this cube steak thing I do, but it's not cube steak. It's because I always screwed up filet mignons when they were younger. So all I could do was like cut it into little cubes and pan fry it. So now they call it the juicy cubes. But like I made
Nice.
that with with a rice last night that I put like cardamom and cloves and cinnamon and star anise in, right? And some asparagus.
Wow.
In the micro moments where I actually need a real good reset, believe it or not, cooking for me is very therapeutic because I actually don't worry about anything. I worry about mise en place, right? I worry about the prep work. I worry about the ingredients and the temperature and the time and serving. I'm not a perfect plater, but my cooking, my flavor profiles are really good. So on short notice, that's actually what shuts me down at the end of the day. I literally can just cleanse myself. On the weekends, also back on cooking, dude, I literally like nothing more than spending 5 or 6 hours on a Sunday making a meal. Like
Yeah.
that literally zens me out and it brings me to a new baseline. Now, people will listen and say, "What the hell are you doing for 5 or 6 hours?" Like, I had people over on
Oh no,
Monday.
I know.
On Saturday, I had to make a red sauce, right? And my red sauce is from scratch. So I've got to like grill the sausages. I have my own ground meat mixture. I do veal, all local veal and lamb and pork. So I got to make the mix and I've got my spices that go in there. That has to sit for 12 hours. Then I've got to make the sauce, so I've got to do the mirepoix, and then I've got to do the garlic, and then it's got to sit, and then it needs to sit overnight because that's when the flavors get into it. So you can actually spend 6 or 8 hours making a meal. I also find for me reading, when I sit down with a book, what I need to reset is a distraction.
Right.
So I look for these things that occupy my mind in a very singular way that don't give me a chance to get distracted. I put my phone away. On the weekend side, in the larger reset, I'll literally take off for like 3 or 4 days and I leave my phone in my room and I do not check email. I'll only check text messages and I will only reply for my partner, right? That was it. And I get away. Like I'll go somewhere and it doesn't have to be like an island or the Caribbean or anything like that, but I'll go somewhere that is far away from tech and far away from distractions, professional distractions, and I'll just consume myself with my wife, right, or one of the boys, or in something that kind of distracts me. And I've learned to take these micro moments and actually use them as a full reset and be better. Like after a horrible day, there's nothing I like better than losing myself and cooking a meal, to be honest.
Yeah.
That is the best way to kind of reset me.
TJ, I knew you cooked, but I didn't know you're like next level. So I'm adding to my bucket list either having you cook for me or learning to cook from you, one or the other or both maybe.
You should
Um,
come out. You should come out. Portsmouth, New Hampshire is a stunning place. I think one
Yeah.
way you can reset is you can come to Portsmouth with Rich and bring your wife, and
And you could get
this
a
is a
tattoo while you're there.
I mean,
I mean, it'd
I'm
be
I'm walking distance to downtown, but yeah, dude, I like did Indian cooking explicitly for like 2 years. Like when I
Wow.
told the dude that was mentoring me that I was grinding my own turmeric, he's like, "You're grinding turmeric?" I'm like, "Isn't that how they do it in the old ways?" He's like, "No, we buy bags. Like we buy the powders." I'm like, "You don't make your own garam masala?" They're like, "No." I'm like, I got a 14. I got 14 things in my garam masala. You don't like toast the spices. I hand grind everything.
Yeah,
Dude,
that's next
I'm
level.
OCD, but again, there are these little things that like I just lose myself in it.
Yeah.
So I like it. And that was that. And then what was the second part? It was about a shitty day or no?
mistakes.
Oh, how do I handle failure? I like a grown up. Like I swallow it and I admit to myself, and I apologize to who or whatever I failed at. And Frank, I remember when we pooched your project and I called you and we didn't get the follow on work, and I was like, dude, I apologize. Like we didn't show up well. So the way I try and deal with failure is first of all admit it to myself, then have a conversation with whoever is affected. By the way, even my teams, because staff members have a hard time dealing with failure. It can literally ruin them for a week or a weekend or a month,
Yeah.
quite frankly. And I talk very openly about it because I don't think that we are good and that we've arrived at these places in our career because we've done everything right. I think we've arrived in these places in our career, the three of us, because we've done everything wrong a number of times and we've failed miserably, and that we've embraced and accepted that failure, because there's no better lesson than the shame and anxiety that goes with seeing failure coming, failure starting, unable to course correct the failure, and then getting to the other side of it and having to be humbled with what it was. So that's how I tend to deal with it.
Love it.
Love that.
Rick,
Love
how
that.
do you reset, buddy?
I mean, there's a couple ways. Like I say, my shorter reset is probably get in the gym. I mean, working out is a huge important thing for me, and I'll come back to this because you're talking about failure, but I can kind of tell when I'm in breakdown because I'm not working out. So that means there's something going on for me, right? Because I'm not eating well, I'm not working out. Like they kind of go together, right? And that's when I know I'm in trouble. So a reset to me is get in the gym. A bigger reset is travel. I mean, I love travel. I love, TJ, you mentioned a little bit, but kind of getting out of, sitting here behind my desk or, getting away somewhere. And I have happy places, it's kind of finding happy places, but sometimes a happy place is being with my wife somewhere, walking the streets, seeing something new. I mean,
Dude, the couple maintenance is the best micro getaway.
it
Nights out
is.
and date nights. Yeah.
It is, and I mean, and it's so nourishing, right? Like so, and it doesn't have to be. You don't have to go on a big trip. Like we were talking about the couple maintenance, like an overnight downtown Chicago, like one
Love it.
night downtown, and that could be like a huge reset for our couple, but also for me. You know what I mean? And I could say it's for my wife and all that, but it's for me. I needed some connection. I needed something, right? Because you mentioned it, Frank. Like this whole imposter syndrome thing is real, right? Like, when you feel like you're always fucking up, um, and and you're just trying not to, and I think that's a bigger driver for me than being successful. It was more not to fail.
Yeah.
Which
I
leads
wasn't I
right
wasn't like
into
I'm gonna start 5 companies, I'm gonna flip them, I'm gonna start another one, I'm gonna flip it. Like I was just trying to do the right thing and be somewhere where I felt like people liked me and I was creating a family, and hopefully I was doing the right thing, and my connection to those people and their families was the most important thing. And it's hard, but you kind of trust like if you do the right thing, that the right thing's going
Right.
to happen.
Man, you and I are so much more alike than I ever thought.
We are. We
There was
are.
nothing that gutted me more than having to make the decision that it was time to go, because like
Yeah.
that was my gravity. Like that was
Yeah.
the thing that made me feel alive and purposeful and needed and wanted. And by the way,
Absolutely.
I was good at my job, and I loved it, and I still love it actually. In my mind, I'm still doing my job, but
Yeah.
Well, you still
I
keep
love
your
that.
office there.
I do. Well, I own we own the condo, so
Ah,
Eric did tell me to go get my shit out actually a couple weeks ago. He's like, "Hey, can you like maybe?"
Can
Because
you
my
move
office is
out?
set up like a living room. So, well, there's no, it's a living room. It literally looks like a college kid's dorm room in there. But I love that answer, Rich. So moving off the reset side of it, because you mentioned failure, like how did you deal with that? Because you and I have we've stepped in a lot of potholes along the
Yeah.
way.
I think what you said was super important, and I think there's two sides of it, but the one side is own it and be honest. I mean, there's no question, right? And face it, and like you said, make the call. Let's not try to pretend. And a good friend who TJ knows, but you don't know him, Frank. When I talked about Scott at Playboy, like I learned a lot from him when he said, like, assume you're always in breakdown. You know what I mean? Because I think the times when I was trying to pretend everything is great and I'm not scanning and I'm not looking, those are the times where I dig a really big hole for a really long time. So if we assume we're in breakdown, meaning my eating's off, my exercise is off, my relationship's off, I'm not sharing, I'm upset about something and I'm trying to eat it away and bury it, or I'm watching TV till really late at night and then getting up early and then I'm grumpy. And I mean, you get in these cycles, right? And if you don't catch it and if you don't have someone around that's saying, dude, what the fuck? Like, you kind of need that corner person, right? Like I boxed a couple times, and that's a different story for another time. But
I heard some of that.
that's a different story. You need someone in your corner, like that's gonna like patch up your cuts, but also sometimes kick you in the ass and be like, "Come on, dude." So I think, how did I deal with failure? I mean, look for the message in it. Like I think things happen for a reason, and that's my belief about the world. So if something happened, what am I supposed to learn, right? And if I don't learn, then I'm going to make the same mistake again. And that's what I don't want to do. And I used to tell my people, I'm fine with you making mistakes. Like that's part of us being in business, but make the same mistake 3 times, I'm probably going to fire you, right? But I mean, but that's just not being aware. Like, okay, I made a mistake. What is it? Why? What is there to learn? What's the message for me? Like I try to look at everyone's got a message for me, right? If I tend to listen, and I think if I'm not listening, then that message is going to come harder and harder and harder at me until it really hurts. So maybe if I can listen to it the first time, maybe I can avoid the punch in the face. So I think, and I don't know if you guys saw, did we talk about this? Did we talk about the Federer speech or the
No,
Brady
no,
Hall of Fame
No.
induction speech?
no. But we did post an extensive dialogue about your boxing stint.
Oh yeah, so forget that. No, but Federer just did a commencement address, and Brady just got inducted into the Patriots Hall of Fame. And the only reason I bring that up because there are some key points in there. Roger Federer won 80% of his matches, right? As a professional. What percentage of points do you think he won in his matches to win 80% of those games?
Wasn't it one?
No, how many points, percentage? Like, so 0 to 100, what percentage of points did he win in those matches?
55.
54, which is unbelievable, right? So his point is almost every other point you're going to lose. So get used to it, right? And then go hit the next point. So TJ, you kind of said it. You make a mistake and you fuck up, admit it, do the right thing, but then learn and go swing at the next point because there's another
Move on.
point coming. If you're down and you're crying and you're defending and you're like, oh, that's not my fault, that was your fault. I think loyalty and over responsibility go together. Like I take over responsibility for things, right? Things are my fault, right? Even if they're not, I'm gonna like with my employees and stuff. That's my fault, right? I'm the CEO. Everything is my fault, right? Own it, and then and then, Tom Brady was talked about life is hard. Football was hard, he talked about, right? When other people are going to the beach and he's carrying his heavy equipment to practice, it's hard, right? And I tried to instill that in my kids, right? Life's not always fair, and it is hard, and that means you have to work hard. And I think realizing that help me deal with failure, right? It's going to happen, and life isn't always fair, but what am I going to do about it? And what I'm going to do about it is learn and try again, right? And try to keep that. And it doesn't mean that I'm not going to bitch a little bit. I'm not going to complain a little bit, because I'm a great victim. And if we had our wives on here, my wife would tell you all that I blame her for everything. I mean, that's why I got married, so I could blame her for everything. And it's kind of our joke now, But, I'm an expert at blaming, but then after that, it's like you give yourself a time limit. I'm going to complain for 5 minutes. Yeah. Now what am I going to do? And if I choose not to do anything, that's fine. That's my choice, though. But if I choose to do something, if I choose not, stop crying about it. Because no one's going to come and change it.
I love that. That's definitely a different way of dealing with failure, and I think like you said, Rich, it happens to all of us, and you just have to know what's coming. I think we have a generation now where failure feels like the world's falling around them, and it's just because there's been a little bit too much coddling and protection, even professionally, of not letting people fail. I've always told my staff, like, they're like, so what's the best way if something goes wrong? Like, what do I do? Like, you come in my office and you tell me I fucked up and I need help. Don't come in my office and tell me Scotty fucked up. Don't come in and tell me that you sort of made a bad call and somebody else fucked you. Like, come in and be honest and sit down and say, you want to disarm me? Come into my office and ask for help, right, and know what you need help with. And I will literally clear my schedule for a week to help somebody out. I will.
Right.
But, that's the big thing, because I think that's a skill that we don't mentor enough professionally. I think people think they need to go deal with failure quietly, and the anxiety that comes with feeling like you're a failure, whether you are or you aren't, privately. And I think it needs to be a little bit more open dialogue, but maybe that's me.
No, I agree.
I don't know. Who knows? Well, we're pretty deep in here, Frank. Do you want to ask more questions?
Yeah, one more.
What do you
all right. One more.
I love them. I think these are great questions. I might break these out into shorts.
More industry related this time. So both of you guys
Yes,
were
sir.
commerce agencies for many years. You stepped away from that, right? Like, what are your thoughts on that industry right now? And that industry's changed, right? There's always a cycle of change happening in that industry, acquisitions and turnovers and things like that. But I feel like recently it's been, again, there's been some leadership changes across some of those agencies. There's been some acquisitions within that. Like, what are your thoughts on that industry right now?
It's really interesting you have this as a question, because one of the questions I have written down here that I didn't ask you was, what advice do you have for this new generation of SIs and SI leaders out there? It's literally on this piece of paper in front of me. What do I think about the state of SIs? I made this comment to Adam. I actually think, Frank, that we're moving into an era where there is an opportunity for a new type of agency to rebirth itself, or start anew if they decide. But I think people are so much smarter and more educated, especially on the leadership side, on brands than they ever were, right? We're sort of at the pinnacle of a 10-year run of tried and failed and tried and failed and tried and succeeded. And I think we're at this new era where there's room for a new type of agency, or a rebirth of the agency model and what they can and should be doing. I use the word agency because I think an SI is largely just technical. I think being technical is going to be an issue, because you can only dig so deep if you're just purely technical. But I'm a fan of the acquisitions. I'm a fan of some of the consolidation that's gone on. But the agencies still have to look at what is the market 3, 5, 7 years out, and how do I put a pin out there, and how do I move in that direction? I think right now a lot of the agencies and a lot of the SI specifically, they're selling old goods to a new audience, and brands are bringing people internally. They're building their own subject matter expertise. They have architects on staff. Remember when you didn't have an architect on staff and you'd bring an architect in, he was like God, right? They have UX people, and they have patterns, and they have systems, and they have legacies, and there's a lot of knowledge there. And I don't think that the agency model or the SI model is matured to the point of saying, not how do I survive right now, but how do I jump in front of what's going on, and how do I do that thing that is 3, 5, and 7 and 10 years out going to offer institutional value to my clients, right? How do I be the same partner for the next 10 years that I was for the last 10 years? Because I think what we did as agency leaders and to get where we are today is nothing like what we're going to need over the next 10 years. Things are moving too fast. Social is on fire. TikTok is killing it. Even if they get rid of it or shut it down or whatever they tell you, we're still going to have YouTube Shorts and all the other things. Composable is not going to go away. ISVs are not going to go away. React front ends and custom front ends and mobile experiences. There's a whole other interaction model that's out there. Like, when are we going to have an agency that actually invests in the entire customer experience?
Right.
Not just the ads, not just the emails, not just the on-prem, but what happens when there's a phone call into customer service? What happens when there's a bad email? What happens when these 2 teams or 3 teams in the enterprise aren't even working together, and the customer service system isn't tied into the e-tail system, and it isn't covered in the retail system, right? When are we going to make a real CDO actually in charge of everything that digital touches? So I think it's about looking forward, and I don't think enough folks are trying to think about what do I need to be for the next 10 years that made me as successful as I was for the last 10 years. I think we're trying to get 11 and 12 years out of ideas that are a decade old, personally. Sorry, Rich.
No, I agree.
Answered. Yeah. Well, we are 1:45 in. This might be our longest podcast, Frank. So,
and I know there's tons of other stuff to talk about, so we're going to have to do another one.
I'm sure you'll cut a lot of it out. You'll leave some of it on the editing floor.
No, I actually won't even cut out this comment, but I usually go through and cut some of my swearing out. In this episode, I didn't do it, but sometimes I say things that maybe I shouldn't be publishing. But no, if this is going to end at 1:45, 1:46, I'll probably only cut 2 or 3 minutes out of this, and it'll be the weird, uncomfortable stuff. So,
yeah.
Frank,
no one's going to want to watch an hour and 45 minutes of me.
Yeah, they will. Yeah, they will. This is gold.
Yeah, they
will. This is the type of knowledge that you can't get, right? This is the stuff nobody wants to talk about. It's not about e-com. It's not about composable. It's about the moments in between the moments, right? It's about being human and, not perfection, but what was my word, Rich? I said, we're not trying to be perfect. We're trying to be, I've already forgot. I don't know. Anyway.
Human.
I'm going to cut that part out. So, sorry, Rich. Frank, super appreciate you taking time out of your day to chat with Rich and I. It's been an honor to talk with you. As I said, you whether you think so or not, you're a legend on the brand side, and I don't think there's a single SI out there that doesn't know your name and that you don't come up in conversations and people wish they knew you a little bit more or had more conversations with you. I love the sharing that you did personally and professionally, and I especially love the questions that you asked. So it's an honor to get time with you. And again, we're going to have you back on. I think we just do a 30, 35, 45-minute episode of you just asking us questions, because the questions were pure gold. So
I want to do a 30, 35-minute cooking show with TJ.
Yeah, right.
We could do that. I could get set up upstairs. I actually have a kitchen. My kitchen actually looks like a cooking show kitchen.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
But Rich, as always, I love you to death, bud, and I appreciate you sticking with me here.
Love you too, brother.
I do steal most of the oxygen out of the room. So
you're the best.
For anyone still here at a minute 45-ish in, thanks for listening in or watching another episode of Tea with Rich. I am T. This is Rich. This is our very, very good friend Frank, and I appreciate everyone's time. So we'll get back to your day. Thanks, everyone.
Guys. Love you guys.
Bye.
Thank you, man.